Good afternoon. Today's announcement of 14 individuals charged, including one pending arrest involving 3 separate construction fraud schemes, demonstrates what DOI investigations have shown again and again. There is an unquestionable, unbreakable link between construction, integrity, and safety. When city inspectors fail to identify violations of properties in exchange for a bribe, when construction professionals sell their licenses for cash, paving the way for unpermitted work, when the presence of asbestos is ignored so construction can move forward without delay, worker and public safety is compromised. I'm proud to be standing here with our partner, District Attorney Eric Gonzalez, whose office has worked side by side with us on this 2-year investigation and on other important construction fraud investigations. DA Gonzalez, I want to thank you and your team of prosecutors who are helping DOI root out corruption, fraud, waste in this city and on city construction sites. The 3 schemes we are announcing today show how prevalent and broad construction fraud can be. They involve city inspectors, property managers and developers, and private construction professionals. These cases came to light as we worked with the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office on another investigation. Earlier this year, that case culminated with the announcement of charges against more than 3 dozen individuals, including 7 National Grid employees, in connection with a scheme to operate a shadow utility company. As DOI investigators sat on the court-ordered wiretap related to that case, it was a conversation between an expediter and a building owner that caught our attention. The discussion focused on an asbestos investigator who, for a price, could produce clean papers for an asbestos inspection. In other words, certifying that a site was asbestos-free and work could continue without the cost and delay of abatement, even when in fact it was not. That asbestos investigator was identified as Alexander Kogan, and surveillance of Kogan's phone led us to 3 property owners, and one whose arrest is pending, who have been charged with paying Kogan for a clean asbestos report, allowing them to avoid asbestos abatement according to the charges. As the investigation continued, DOI investigators heard a property manager ask Kogan for, quote, clean papers, and Kogan agreed. And I want to take a moment for you to hear that exchange. Just another moment for you to hear that exchange. There we go.
Hello? Yeah, Mr. Hunter. Yeah, hi, this is Alex. Yeah. How are you? I'm doing good, what's up? I'm good. So tell me about this house. What can you do for me?
I'm sure you know if you bought the house, it's a 3-story in the basement, oversized. I can do it for $3,500.
No, not the price that you can do it. My question not the price. My question is what can I get clean papers or?
Hey.
What?
If we're talking, yes, you can. I just don't want to talk over the phone.
Okay, that's it. Okay, so we will meet. Okay, we'll talk.
Bye.
Okay.
They obviously were talking over the phone. In some cases, Kogan never checked whether asbestos was present, and in others he provided clean drywall to manipulate the results of lab analysis. DOI investigators actually witnessed Kogan go into one Brooklyn property and walk out 4 minutes later, a time frame far too short to have performed a genuine inspection. He later submitted a report to the city that said the property was clear of asbestos. We notified the City Department of Environmental Protection, whose investigators then re-inspected and found asbestos, making sure the project did not continue until it was abated. For compromising his integrity, Kogan earned between $1,500 and $3,000 for each bogus inspection report. Based on the findings of this investigation, Kogan surrenders his asbestos investigator license. In all 7 Brooklyn properties associated with the charges, DEP has followed up at those sites. In 3 of the 7, asbestos was present, and only timely intervention by DOI stopped construction that would have disturbed the asbestos. Let me be clear. The impact of this charged conduct is serious. When asbestos is disturbed, it risks the safety of workers and the public who may be exposed to it. That original National Grid wiretap was prolific and provided even more leads for DOI investigators to uncover construction fraud. We were tipped to a second scheme by a familiar voice discussing construction inspections. In fact, it turned out to be City Buildings Inspector Hiram Beza. Beza was arranging for property owners and contractors to cancel inspections likely to be done by honest inspectors and reschedule them for a time when Beza could perform them. This gave property owners the assurance of passing. As more leads developed, we uncovered misconduct involving a second city buildings inspector, Dean Malzek, who also passed the inspection of a Flushing, Queens property, providing construction sign-off when it was not warranted, according to the investigation. Malzak's price? A pair of earrings for his girlfriend, valued at about $100, paid by the property owner who also happened to own a jewelry store. Beza's price was a little different. He got a new kitchen and driveway from contractors whose work he inspected, as well as cash payoffs. In addition to the arrest of the 2 city buildings inspectors, 6 property managers and developers were also charged. And the stories were similar every time. DOB inspectors established a relationship with property owners who kept those city inspectors on virtual retainer, where their services were available upon request, and the outcome of their inspections were always the same, regardless of whether violations existed. We even heard Beza placing a request for cash in anticipation of an upcoming Mother's Day. 2 hotels and 6 residential properties in Brooklyn and 1 residential property in Flushing, Queens are involved in this scheme. As a result of this investigation, DOB has re-inspected these sites. On the same wiretap, productive and useful things, these wiretaps, DOB investigators heard another recognizable pattern. A licensed master plumber selling his credentials to an unlicensed plumber, allowing for unlicensed work. The city's construction code is explicit in this area. Licensed master plumbers must do the work themselves or directly supervise it. Licensed master plumber Henry Samuels is charged with selling his license for between $1,500 and $2,000 a job, according to the investigation. We call this kind of scheme covering, and it undercuts safety because the work that gets done is often unlicensed and unpermitted. 2 years ago, we saw how dangerous such covering can be when a gas leak tore through a Lower East Side building, killing 2. DOI arrested a licensed master plumber for covering related to those deaths. In fact, here in this scheme, one of the most significant violations we found was an unlicensed individual installing a gas-powered hot water heater and related gas piping, work that was not permitted by the City Buildings Department. As a result of the investigation, we have sent buildings inspectors to the site and they have issued violations. Dozens of addresses are associated with this scheme and DOB has re-inspected them. This investigation underscores the gravity of these cases. Fabricating documents, lying about conducting investigations or who is actually doing the work has serious consequences. For these defendants, it's about expediting the construction timeline, about making an extra buck. But for the workers, for New Yorkers, it's about our health and safety. And we won't stand for it to be compromised. That is the message from today's arrests. I want to take a moment to thank both DEP Commissioner Vincent Sapienza and DOB Commissioner Rick Chandler, whose agencies were cooperative and helpful in the investigation and follow-up. I also want to thank teams from DOI and the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office who worked these investigations. From DOI, I want to thank investigators Christina Clyburn, Alicia Ramator, Kyle Waters, Chief Investigator James McGillicuddy, Assistant Inspector General Michael Antolini, and Deputy Inspector General Ed Zinzer, under the supervision of Inspector General Greg Cho, Associate Commissioner James Flaherty, Deputy Commissioner Chief of Investigations Michael Carroll, and First Deputy Commissioner Leslie Brovner. I also want to thank the NYPD detectives assigned to DOI for their assistance. From the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office, I want to recognize Assistant District Attorneys Sarah Walsh, Adam Lebove, Kate Strzeski, Renee Hassel, a DOI attorney who's been assigned to the Brooklyn DA's Public Integrity Bureau, Bureau Chief of Public Integrity Michael Spinakos, Deputy Chief of Investigations Patricia McNeil, Senior Executive for Crimes and Strategies and Investigations Mark Feldman. DA Gonzalez, it's always great to work with you and your team. And now let me turn the podium over to District Attorney Gonzalez. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Commissioner Peters, for hosting us today. Thank all of you for coming. As you heard from the Commissioner, the results of this investigation uncovered worrisome and potentially dangerous situations in which city inspectors and private construction professionals were willing to look the other way in order to receive cash and gifts and to otherwise line their pockets. These defendants ignored public safety for their own profit. They signed off on fraudulent inspections or allowed for possibly unsafe and unlicensed work to continue. These are crimes that feed on Brooklyn's soaring popularity and lucrative and increasingly expensive real estate market, and these illegal activities must cease. As the Commissioner told you, these cases grew out of a long-term investigation that we announced last year, and they should serve as a stark reminder and as a warning to developers intent on taking shortcuts to increase their profits that we will be vigilant in investigating and prosecuting these cases. We're going to continue to work with our law enforcement partners such as DOI, and we will continue to root out public corruption. These investigations are also a testament to our continuing commitment to keeping Brooklyn safe. We cannot ignore these types of corruption schemes, and that they are all the more disturbing because in many of these cases, as we've seen in this case, the very people whose job it is to ensure public safety are willing to turn a blind eye to safety violations when they receive cash or gifts and otherwise illegal bribes. And these schemes are simple. In this particular case, one of the defendants, Alex Kogan, who was the asbestos inspector licensed by the Department of Environmental Protection, who we allege took bribes in excess of $3,000 to fudge asbestos reports and to ensure that any samples removed from a property came back negative. So how did he do it? He simply walked into a Home Depot and purchased clean sheetrock, and then he submitted that for testing. That it was simple, that it was appalling, makes it nonetheless a betrayal of trust that could have resulted in serious health issues and problems for workers at these sites and for us, the general public. People who engage in these schemes show complete disregard, not just for their own personal integrity, but for the rule of law and for the personal well-being of every person living, working, and even visiting Brooklyn. We will not allow anyone to sell out the safety of people in our borough for their own profit. So once again, let me warn those who would dare to try to corrupt or bribe DOI and the Brooklyn DA's office will be there to investigate, arrest, and prosecute you. I want to thank the Department of Investigation, whose investigators spent many, many hours working on these cases in partnership with the Public Integrity Unit in the Brooklyn DA's office. Both DOI and the Public Integrity Unit are dedicated to rooting out corruption and bribery in all of its forms. And I want to personally commend and thank Commissioner Mark Peters for leading the charge here to root out these public corruption cases in the construction industry. And also to thank Commissioner Rick Chandler from the Department of Buildings and Commissioner Sapienza from the Department of Environmental Protection. You should all know that both commissioners were very cooperative in helping the investigation and making sure that any possibility of harm that could have come to the public was immediately mitigated. So I also, again, want to thank all the investigators and to the people of the prosecutors in the Brooklyn DA's office. I thank all of you for doing a few things, for restoring confidence that this city will root out public corruption, and for making sure that the people of the city and the people of Brooklyn are kept safe. Thank you.